California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance in Sacramento. We are joined by Don Wagner, member of the California State Assembly, representing beautiful Orange County portions thereof. And I want to get a sense from you how the drought is impacting Orange County. And the reason I ask is, you know, in past droughts, Southern California really suffered and Northern California was doing fine, but it seems like it may be a little different this time around.
I think it's a little bit different. It's frankly flipped. Orange County is getting through this drought reasonably well. There are not talks about significant restrictions. We're not being asked to cut down on showers. I mean, we're being asked to do our part, but the bottom line is Orange County has managed its water resources very well over the last several years, and we're getting through this well.
Why? I mean, and you're not the only ones. LA County, who would have thought? They're doing all right. I mean, there are some restrictions, and that's fine, but nothing like past droughts.
Well, it might well be that less we did well and more some of the folks in Northern California just didn't do well.
Oh, you think?
They weren't perhaps as prepared, they weren't as conscious, and maybe we're a little bit more wasteful. I don't have all of the details, but I do know coming up to Sacramento from the Southern California area and knowing historically how bad it's been up there, and I see up here what we used to see down there. And it's an odd inversion.
Right. I understand that one of the reasons why Orange County does fairly well is it has its own groundwater basin. What's working with the groundwater basin? In Los Angeles, there's some groundwater basins, but there's some contamination issues. Orange County's in good shape?
Well, we've managed to duck some of those contamination issues, and our water folks on the ground in Orange County have been very proactive. I've had an opportunity to tour several facilities, MoDOC facilities, sanitation district facilities. They make a very concerted effort and have thrown a fair amount of money into infrastructure to make sure that they can recycle, make sure they can replenish the groundwater, make sure that they are responsible steward of that resource.
So when you look at the groundwater basin under Orange County, it's doing fairly well. We're not having an overdraft issue. You know, in Central California, the overdrafting is quite dramatic to the point of subsidence.
Correct. Yeah. And we are not hearing about that in any great detail, and certainly not to the extent we're seeing in the Central Valley. They are seriously hurting.
So what does that mean as we march through the end of the year and into next year? You know, we hear about El Nino, maybe that will bring us rain, but you know, there's a sense that, you know, some areas are dodging a bullet, but if this goes on for much longer, we could face some real challenges.
Oh, I think we're facing real challenges right now, but there's no question, Brad, if this goes on longer and the pain gets stretched out, that it's going to creep further and further south. And that's one of the reasons it's very important the state legislature take a serious look at the problem and some potential fixes, which we're trying to do in the last month of our session.
I want to ask about groundwater before we talk about storage and other issues. There is a move to regulate groundwater. 49 states have a regulation, one doesn't, that's California. I understand that Republicans and Democrats are somewhat on board to create some type of regulatory scheme. Is that fair?
That's fair to say. Devil's always in the details. What does that regulatory scheme look like? My concern is the track record of California in regulating our environmental resources and, in fact, regulating in general doesn't give me a whole lot of confidence. So I'm going to want to take a look very closely at what's being proposed and look for loopholes and try to not expand the problem.
Are you hopeful that locals will receive the regulatory power as opposed to the state?
Oh, I believe that's absolutely where it ought to be. Am I hopeful it'll happen that way? That's one of the things I want to watch, because I believe put the regulatory control in the hands of the locals who know best their own communities and what their communities need. That's the way to do it.
When we come back, I want to talk more about this issue, talk about storage specifically. For our viewers on HLN, thanks for joining us. For other viewers, we'll be right back. So I do want to talk about storage because it is a significant issue, percolating, if I may use that cliche, in Sacramento and otherwise. Some would argue, surprisingly enough, both Democrats and Republicans see a need for some above-ground storage. Am I reading that correctly?
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. The the issue is going to be where is the storage, how expensive is the storage, and how do we finance that new storage, but we need it.
I gotta ask you, how do we get to a place where there's consensus on above ground storage? When I remember growing up, I mean, you even said the word dam, and it was like saying the word dam. I mean, dams were just impossible. I mean, those were, the dirty words.
Well, they remain dirty words with some of my colleagues in the legislature. But by and large, as you say, there is a consensus there because folks recognize that you have to. We have to have the resources. We have to have the resources to provide water to Northern California. We have to provide it to the Central Valley, which is lying fallow and feeds so much of this nation. In a perfect world, maybe we wouldn't. We don't live in that perfect world. We need the storage, and responsible leaders up and down the state in both parties are seeing that.
So what does that storage look like? Are we building new storage? Are we improving existing storage? Are we also looking at creating storage opportunities for underground?
The answer is, I think, a responsible policy looks at all three of those options and maybe even some others.
Okay.
If you want to ask me, and I would hope my colleagues would have the same answer, if you want to ask any one of us, what does it look like? We would say, wait a minute, we're responsible for the policy, that's what we're elected for, and I want to talk to the professionals. Tell me, where do I need a new dam and where can I responsibly put it, or new dams and responsibly put them? Which current reservoirs can I allow more capacity? What are some of the options? And ask the engineers, ask the water professionals, ask those folks who know that stuff better than any policymaker does, those technical details.
Right.
That we need it, though, I think everybody more or less agrees.
In the background, there's also the question of the delta, not only habitat restoration, but just the safety of the delta. And as we look forward towards bonds or otherwise, what's happening on that front? It seems like there's a lot of discussion on delta restoration, but then the safety of it may be put off towards what's known as the Bay Delta Conservation Plan. Am I reading this correctly?
I think you're reading it correctly. There, again, remain many moving parts. Let's keep in mind one thing, though. The Bay is a marvelous resource for all of California.
Right.
And we need to do the right thing by the Bay. That doesn't mean, however, that it gets locked away and nobody can ever use it, it gets fixed and water is off the table.
Right.
We do need to, in addition to worry about storage, we need to worry about transportation. You gotta get the water to the places where it's needed. And part of Bay Delta Conservation Plan and part of the fix of the Bay Delta, I think, does include, or should certainly include, responsible transportation questions.
I was reading some analysis, and what I'm about to tell you does seem extreme, but I do want to get your sense of it. This expert, we can call her, discussed the possibility that we may need to look at migration out of California. We simply don't have the water we need to continue the growth in our great state. Are we there?
No. I don't believe we're there. I don't know who that expert was, but I don't believe we're there. I believe that with responsible management of the water and with increased storage, we can continue to provide it to the state and keep the state the marvelous place that it has been. My concern about migration outward is not over water, it's over excess regulation, it's over business, it's over...
We've discussed those.
Those other things you and I have talked about. Responsible management of water means that we will have it for the people who want to come here and want to build lives here. That's why it's important.
And one could argue that that does cause a need for some regulation, like what we discussed with groundwater. Can we get to a place where we are regulating groundwater in such a way that it's still business friendly, if that's what we use?
Can we get there? The answer is yes. Responsible legislators can get there. But the question you asked earlier is a good one, and it's essentially, will we? And I think our track record on regulation in this state is spotty. Can we get there? Yes. I certainly intend to work as hard as I can to get us there. But there are an awful lot of players in this very complicated drama to know for sure how it's going to end up.
He is John Wagner, member of the California State Assembly. My name is Brad Pomerance. We thank you for watching California Edition.